Good afternoon. In these days of wars and rumors of wars, which always seem to breed crime and corruption in high places, and selfish hoarding by people who think only of themselves, it's heartwarming and encouraging to meet folks like the McGreals of Peterborough, New Hampshire. Mrs. McGreal is Elizabeth Yates, author of a dozen or more clean, lively human interest books that make good reading for any member of the family. I've already told you about her Patterns on the Wall, which had for its background the terrible cold year of 1816. Her newest book about Amos Fortune, the famous colored slave of Jaffrey, New Hampshire, has been chosen by the New York Herald Tribune as the best book for older boys and girls for 1950. And as one of the older boys myself, I can recommend it highly. And I plan to tell the story of that famous New Hampshire slave in a future broadcast. Mr. McGreal is also an author. And while in London several years ago, he published a series of children's books illustrated with his own photographic studies of animals. Within the past year, William McGreal has written as delightful an insect adventure as it's been my pleasure to read. The hero is Andy the musical ant, who would rather play his accordion than work. This child's book by Bill McGreal is not illustrated with photographs by the author. And behind that statement is a story that I think you'll find worthwhile. The amusing and clever illustrations in Andy the musical ant are from the pen and brush of Nora Unwin, a talented English artist who came over from London to work and live with the McGreals in their lovely old-fashioned farmhouse in the shadow of Packmanadnock. For many years, Bill McGreal was Eastern sales manager for the Remington Cash Register Company, with headquarters in New York. Elizabeth was busy writing for the New York Times and the Christian Science Monitor. When Mr. McGreal was transferred to London in 1929, Elizabeth went over there and they were married. They liked Old England all right, but they never completely forgot one section of New England, the Monadnock region. They were in Reykjavik, Iceland, when all of a sudden they decided to come back. So they wrote the New Hampshire Development Commission, and Don Tuttle sent them a big package of booklets, circulars, and folders, which was followed by letters from real estate dealers offering everything from a chicken coop to a $50,000 mansion. There were little houses and big barns, mink farms and apple orchards, and one little white farmhouse nestled among the pines of Peterborough. To make a long story short, the McGreals returned to America, went up to New Hampshire, bought the little white house, and they've lived there ever since. While they were removing 7 layers of wallpaper that had hid the plaster of one room for over 100 years, they discovered some original stencils by Moses Eaton, and that gave Elizabeth the inspiration for her book, Patterns on the Wall. Incidentally, the book helped pay for the farm. When Alice and I went up to Peterborough to get this story, we were enchanted with the McGreal homestead. Out front, an old-fashioned pump forms the base for a bed of scarlet geraniums. To the left, the silvery shingled barn stands against the dark green pines, and what was once an ice house is now Miss Unwin's studio, with an ingenious, very attractive hayloft apartment overhead. Mr. McGreal's office stands between the studio and the house. The silver-gray barn, little house among the pines, brick paths and flower gardens with blue mountains beyond make a perfect composition, framed by a split-rail fence and a moss-covered stone wall with a tiny gate. They call their homestead Shealing, and it's especially beautiful after a blizzard. During one severe storm, when they were snowed in for 3 days, Elizabeth was writing rapidly, in longhand, as she does, by the cozy fire, while her husband tackled the towering drifts outside with his snow shovel. Suddenly the sun came out, touching each ice-covered twig and pine cone with crystal. And rushing to the door, Elizabeth said, "Look, Bill, it's like fairyland." Mr. McGreal took off his sunglasses and squinted, but all he saw was shadowy blobs on a dim, monotonous landscape. He shielded his eyes and looked again, and in that terrifying moment, he realized what he had feared for a long time, that he was going blind. Only those who have been thus afflicted can know the depths of despair that come to the human soul in such a moment, and that despair is intensified 1,000 times in the long, dark days and nights that follow. What happened to Bill McGreal that beautiful winter day has happened to thousands of other men and women, but he decided then and there he wasn't going to allow blindness to put him on the shelf. Together they would work out something. Some people, suddenly plunged into a world of darkness, instinctively withdraw from the family circle and friends. give up all activities, become morose and finally despondent. But not Bill McGreal. As soon as he mastered the embarrassing business of finding his way around the house, yard, studio, and garden, he made himself do all sorts of things. By keeping busy and constantly practicing, he kept his mind occupied. But only God will ever know how tough it was at times to achieve the objective he set for himself. He learned to type with the touch system, and he got plenty of outdoor exercise by mowing the lawn, tending the vegetable garden, and sawing and splitting wood. How does he do that? Well, after the chunks have been sawed to stove length, he kneels on the ground, places the stick of wood in front of him, and whacks it with a good sharp axe. If he misses, the axe goes into the turf, and no harm is done. One season, he finished up 10 cords of wood. A casual visitor, seeing Bill McGreal on a ladder or straddling the ridge pole of the barn, would never guess that he was blind. If the family car is balky, he can tell by the sound of the motor what the matter is. This Bill McGreal is one of the finest-looking men I've ever seen. Tall, tanned, with dark eyes and slightly graying hair. He dresses in tweeds, and he has that enviable, healthy, slim, outdoor look that you see in the magazine ads. His most conspicuous assets are his smile and his friendly, almost boyish enthusiasm. He looks straight at you when he talks, motions you to a convenient chair, and dashes from room to room, never once bumping into things. During our conversation, he jumped up, left the room, returned with the magazine open to an article he wanted us to see, and said, "Read that paragraph, Blackie, it's good." To my obvious question, how can a blind man do such things, he says with a wave of his hand, "There's no miracle. It's just constant practice. I put the things I want in certain places and mark them with a note in Braille." Bill McGreal reads and writes fluently by Braille. And unless you have tried to make sense out of hundreds of tiny dots embossed on a strip of paper by running your finger over them, you just can't appreciate what an achievement that is. Shut your eyes and try it sometime, and you'll see what I mean. In June 1946, a friend of the McGreals invited them to visit the Perkins Institute for the Blind at Watertown. And the moment he stepped inside the grounds, Bill McGreal felt at home. None of that uncertain feeling he sometimes had in strange places. He stayed at Perkins 3 days, quartered in Tompkins, one of the senior cottages, with 20 young men, all blind. They were a lively bunch, he said, always laughing, talking, and playing pranks. He had such a wonderful time, he went back to Perkins in the fall and asked Dr. Farrell if he couldn't stay there and study. Dr. Farrell said, "We don't take adults at Perkins, but why don't you stay here and teach? We need an instructor in salesmanship." And that's how Bill McGreal began his courses in business organization and consumer education at Perkins Institute. The boys loved him, and he got great satisfaction knowing that he was helping them to do useful work. The blind, as you may know, make excellent salesmen. The next step in Bill McGreal's career came in 1947 when Herbert W. Rainey, president of the Association for the Blind of New Hampshire, requested Perkins Institute to recommend somebody to take over the affairs of the New Hampshire Society. Dr. Farrell told President Rainey, "Well, the best man I know of is right in your own backyard, William McGreal up in Peterborough." Bill didn't realize when he accepted the position of Executive Secretary of the New Hampshire Association for the Blind that his finances were at an all-time low. And to do all the things he wanted, he had to have money. Undaunted, he set out to raise a sizable sum. Mr. Rainey tells me that in 3 short years, under McGreal's management, they now have an income of about $25,000, which will be spent to improve the condition of some 900 blind persons. All of which goes to show that the right man in the right place can do anything, and that a blind man with courage and persistence can sometimes achieve success where others not so afflicted have failed. I've never seen a happier man on his job than Bill McGreal. He's on the go all of the time. 3 days a week in the agency headquarters in Concord. 3 days on the road. Long evenings in his own office at Peterborough. And being an able and dynamic after-dinner speaker, Mr. McGreal is frequently called upon to tell sighted groups about his work in behalf of New Hampshire's blind. When he took over this job, his first move was to visit as many blind people as he could find. And with a companion to drive his car, he made over 100 calls the first year. This meant many weary miles of traveling over rough mountain roads, often in driving rain or drifting snow. When the car got stuck in a drift, Bill got out and helped shovel. Nothing seems to faze him. In some of the humble homes, he found poor old blind men and women stuck off in a corner by themselves. whiling away the endless, hopeless hours of a useless existence. These, he says, were the hardest cases to handle. When Bill told them he was from an agency, they generally clammed up. They're very sensitive. But when he explained that he, too, was blind, their entire attitude changed at once. They sat there spellbound, as Bill told them of the help that he could bring them. Free eye examinations, treatments, glasses, wheelchairs, sewing and gardening utensils, thermometers marked in Braille, and clocks and watches that can be read by a mere touch of the finger. No other small thing, he told us, boosts the morale of a blind person like being able to keep track of time. It allows him to organize his day and gives him a sort of independence that he didn't have before he had these new watches. Those who have mastered Braille can get all sorts of books and magazines to read. And if some blind person wants a book that isn't in Braille, the society will prepare it. Mr. McGreal told us of a blind Quaker lady who wanted her favorite Quaker stories put in Braille. It was done, and they were presented to her as a birthday present. An old gentleman who got endless enjoyment out of playing cribbage before he was blind was taught to use Braille playing cards, and now he has plenty of company on long winter nights. Right now, Bill is helping a blind farmer build a roadside stand. The society is paying for the construction, electric lights, and so forth. In some homes, especially where there is no radio, out there in the country, Bill demonstrates the so-called talking books, long playing recordings, supplied free by the government. When Bill told these lonely blind folks they could keep the machine and get additional records free by mail, they blessed him, and others bless him for showing them how they can earn a little money at home by weaving, making fiber doormats, towels, and so forth. Some of the blind workers earned as much as 75 cents an hour. And during the last war, the blind did wonderful things. A lot of blind folks didn't know that an attendant may ride free with them on any New England railroad and most of the bus lines. The blind person goes down to the railroad and registers and is given an identification card. Whenever that is presented at the ticket office, a free pass is issued for the person who accompanies the blind traveler on the train. We were interested to learn that many blind people enjoy going to the movies. Why not, said Mr. McGreal. I go real often, sometimes twice a week. I like the movies, especially if it's a story that I'm familiar with. I can follow the plot with the dialogue and the music. And if there is a silent spot, Elizabeth leans over and whispers in my ear, the villain is creeping through the window, or they're just standing there looking at each other. Furthermore, I think it's a good idea for me to get out and mix with people and be among my neighbors. I asked him what plans he has for the future. Well, he said it comes back to money. I wish we had enough so that our caseworkers could visit every blind person in the state more often. And I'd like to see the day when 100 blind workers could be given steady employment. But my greatest wish would be to do something to prevent blindness. And he added, 70% is preventable. I asked about his books. Oh, he laughed. I have got a contract for more Andy the Ant stories, but I'm too busy with my work right now for that sort of thing. Well, folks, that's the story of Mr. William McGreal of Peterborough, New Hampshire, who turned his handicap into a heartwarming, unselfish service for others. The world needs more men like Bill McGreal.